Hi everyone. So let's talk a little bit today about bumblebees. Um, so they're a wonderful group of insects that most of us are familiar with. Sometimes we get a little bit confused about which are bumblebees and which are honeybees. I blame Winnie the Pooh because a lot of those illustrations had bumblebees rather than honeybees. Um, so let's hopefully today clear up and clarify some of our understanding about what bumblebees are, how they're behaving, and what they're doing in our landscapes. Um, so hopefully you can see some pictures of the wonderful variety of different kind of bumblebees that we have in the UK. There are about 25 different species in the UK at the moment. And bumblebees, like honeybees, live in social groups, but the groups behave in a very, very different way. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Most of them nest in the ground, so most of them actually find old mouse nests. So they're kind of burrows down in the ground that are filled with kind of insulation material that the mice has gathered, and then the mice has abandoned it, and then bumblebees will find them and use those spaces. Bumblebees are vital for pollination. You can see the lovely hair that covers all of their body is a great way of transferring pollen. So as the bee goes into the flower, all of the hair will get covered in pollen, and they kind of groom it off and gather it in these little pollen baskets that they have on their legs. They're also the only bee that can do the buzz pollination. So they have this particular vibration that they use when they buzz their wings that releases the pollen on some plants that other plants can't do. Also in that 25 species, you've got a range of different specializations. So some of the bumblebees, for example, have very, very long tongues that they specialize to be able to interact with certain groups of plants. So there's an amazing array of different types of bumblebees. But let's kind of go through the life cycle of the bumblebees, so you can get a sense of how they're behaving. So I've already said that they live in social groups, but actually unlike honeybees that kind of survive through the winter, generally bumblebee families kind of die over the winter. So what you'll find is generally in the sort of first warm days in the spring or even in the late winter, there have been a whole bunch of mothers who have been hibernating, and they'll emerge. So often you'll bump into them in the spring, and they're these enormous bees on that first nice sunny day. And you'll see them flying around, hovering above the ground, and what they're doing is actually looking for potential nest sites. So hopefully they'll find a nice mouse burrow somewhere or something equivalent, and then she'll move in, and she'll also she needs to feed herself as well, so she'll be going around looking for that early pollen that's available in the environment, but also looking for nectar, so she kind of has the energy that she needs to get going. And then she'll start building little structures inside of her nest, and gathering pollen from the environment to provision the nest. And when she feels that she's ready, she'll start laying eggs. And when those eggs are hatched, generally they're on a little structure of pollen, so they can kind of go in and start eating the pollen. The pollen's really useful for them when they're just in their kind of larval stages. It's very rich in protein, so they kind of bulk up, and then eventually they reach their adequate size, and then they'll kind of go through their various molts, a bit like caterpillars do, and then they'll emerge as adult bumblebees, and they'll go out and they'll start foraging. So they'll be the first generation of workers. So up until that point, the mother's having to do everything. She's foraging, she's bringing back the pollen to feed to the young ones. She's building all these little cells for them to do everything. And then once the workers have hatched, she can kind of switch to just being laying eggs, and the workers will go out and do the foraging and start taking care of all the kind of nest building activities that go on inside. So as that happens, then that speeds things up, and then you start getting more and more foragers coming, more and more workers are being laid, so their numbers begin to build up. But they never get to enormous numbers. So probably the height of their expansion in the season, a family might have, say, 300 bees. Whereas if you compare that to honeybees in the height of the season, there might be 50,000 or 60,000. So as the numbers slowly begin to increase, and then as we kind of get towards the end of the summer, they'll start raising male bees as well. So all the workers are female, but they don't have the capacity to reproduce. So the family will start producing males, and the family will start producing what will become the mothers from the following year. So, and then around about this time, the whole nest begins to kind of disintegrate, and the foraging behavior stops, and also the nectar is beginning to diminish at this point, and essentially the whole family begins to collapse. But hopefully what they've left behind is a load of new mothers who've been mated, and they'll go and nest hibernate rather in nice warm spots somewhere, and then hopefully the following spring they'll all pop out and start the whole process again. So that's a kind of very generalized view of the way they're doing things. There's also, to add a little bit of a complication into the mix, there's also another subtype of bumblebees called the cuckoo bumblebees. So, and those of you who know how cuckoos behave might have an inkling of why they're called that. So cuckoos are a bird that sneak into the nests of other birds and push their eggs out and lay their own egg, and then the kind of trick the other birds into rearing, doing all the hard work of the child rearing. So the cuckoo bumblebees do a very similar thing. So they're adapted with a particular species, and they can sneak into the nest once it's already going, and they'll lay their larvae. They'll either subdue the existing mother and kind of take over, or they'll kind of sneak their larvae in, and their larvae can kind of some of the larvae have little pincers on, so they can kind of kill the other larvae. So the other bee family does all the work of foraging and providing all the food for the little ones, and the mother just gets to the cuckoo mother rather gets to sneak in, lay her eggs, and then sneak out again. So there's this whole complex dance going on between the cuckoos and their hosts as well. So they're some of those. I can't quite remember exactly how many it is. I think it's about 6 of the 25 or 26 bumblebee species in the UK are cuckoos. So most of them aren't cuckoos, but there are a few that are. So within this 25 different species, we've got a range of different colors, and you might get variations of colors between the males and females. So have a little look on some bumblebee identification charts, and you can start beginning to spot which bumblebees are working in your garden, and hopefully beginning to find ways to support them with more pollen and more nectar, so that their families can thrive. Okay, I hope that was useful. Take care.